Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're tackling a really big one, a concept that's become incredibly polarizing, the Great Reset, often just called the GR. Ever since it popped up in 2020, this whole idea from the World Economic Forum, the WEF, it's just split opinions right down the middle, hasn't it?
Absolutely. You see these two completely different narratives emerge.
Yeah. Is it this, essential roadmap we need for a sustainable future? Or is it basically paving the way for some kind of scary technocratic dystopia?
And what's fascinating is that our sources show people arguing passionately for both sides, often using the exact same facts, the same data points.
That's the real puzzle here.
Right. So our mission today isn't about picking a winner. It's about impartially pulling out the key insights from these, frankly, opposing viewpoints. We're diving deep into the paradoxes of the Great Reset, the philosophy, the economics, the social questions tangled up in it. We want to help you understand the model of society it's actually proposing, and maybe more critically, who gets to decide where we're all headed in the 21st century.
Because it feels like it starts from a place most people agree on, right? The current global system. It feels broken.
Undeniably.
But then the solution offered by the WEF seems to force this choice. Either radical change led by this sort of global, maybe unaccountable elite.
Or just sticking with the status quo, which many argue is unsustainable anyway. Paralysis.
Exactly. So let's try and dissect this whole debate. Hashtag the WEF Blueprint Origins and Pillars. Okay, let's set the stage a bit. The Great Reset, it was officially launched back in June 2020. You had Klaus Schwab, the WEF founder, and Prince Charles, now King Charles. And they didn't just see the pandemic as a disaster, they actually framed it as this unique opportunity, a once-in-a-generation chance.
A chance to fix things,
Yeah.
big things. They pointed specifically to, well, financial systems looking fragile, healthcare systems totally exhausted, and just massive growing inequality.
So what's the core engine driving this proposed reset?
Well, the central concept, the thing you really have to grasp, is this push towards stakeholder capitalism.
Stakeholder capitalism.
Okay. Yeah, it's a pretty fundamental shift from the traditional view.
Yeah.
Usually, companies are seen as primarily responsible to their shareholders, right? The investors.
Their owners, yeah. Maximize profit for them.
Exactly. But stakeholder capitalism says, no, accountability needs to be much broader. It has to include the employees, the customers, the local communities where the company operates, and critically, the environment itself.
Okay, on the surface, that sounds, well, better. More ethical, maybe.
It certainly has that appeal.
But how does the WEF actually propose making this happen globally? It's a big leap from theory to practice.
It is. And they laid out three sort of fundamental pillars to make the reset operational.
Right, the pillars. What's the first one?
The first is pretty pragmatic, focused on economics, steering the market towards fairer outcomes.
Steering the market. How?
Think of it like economic re-engineering. Things like much more progressive taxation, strengthening labor standards, so better union rights, actual living wages,
Yeah.
and this is a big one, regulating the huge tech monopolies that have so much power now.
So, trying to correct that massive wealth concentration we've seen.
Precisely. That's the stated goal.
Okay, pillar one is market fairness. What's pillar two?
Pillar 2 tackles the big existential crisis, investing in sustainability. This means a huge, unprecedented shift of capital, both public and private money,
Towards green stuff.
towards the green economy, yeah. We're talking retrofitting buildings to be zero emission, massive investment in renewable energy, and basically aligning all major financial decisions with global targets, like the Paris Agreement.
A huge mobilization of funds.
Unprecedented is the word they use.
Got it. And the third pillar, this sounds like where the tech comes in.
Exactly. This is where the future really gets built, or maybe controlled, depending on how you look
Yeah.
at it. It's harnessing the fourth industrial revolution.
The 4IR, we hear that term a lot.
Yeah, and for anyone not familiar, it's basically the merging of the physical, digital, and biological worlds. Think advanced AI, genetic engineering, the Internet of Things connecting everything.
All that cutting edge tech.
Right. And the reset argument is that this powerful tech needs to be deliberately steered towards the common good.
Okay, common good sounds nice, but what does that mean in practice?
Well, proponents give examples like, instead of just using AI to maximize ad clicks or, automate jobs away,
Which is often the focus now.
right, they suggest directing it towards diagnosing rare diseases or creating personalized education for kids in underserved areas, or maybe optimizing how whole cities use energy to meet climate goals.
So the tech itself isn't inherently bad. It's about how we choose to use it. That's the argument.
That's the argument from the proponents, yes. The direction is key.
Okay, this all sounds very ambitious, maybe even idealistic in parts. But then there's that phrase.
Yes. We absolutely have to talk about the soundbite that just ignited everything. That video clip that said, "You'll own nothing and you'll be happy."
Yeah, that one phrase seemed to just explode, didn't it? It became the symbol for the whole thing, especially for critics.
It really did. And the context is super important here, but often gets lost.
Okay, so what was the context? Because it sounds pretty alarming on its own.
It does. So the WEF actually put this out in a video way back in 2016. It wasn't presented as a policy goal, like this is what we want to enforce. It was framed as a prediction, a potential scenario for the year 2030.
A prediction based on what?
Based on the rise of the subscription economy, essentially.
Yeah.
Think about how we consume things now, Netflix instead of DVDs, maybe using ride-sharing or car subscriptions instead of owning a car, companies leasing equipment instead of buying it outright.
Access over ownership.
Exactly. They were projecting that trend forward, suggesting a future where you subscribe to services and experiences rather than owning physical assets. The happy part was framed around convenience, less clutter, maybe lower environmental impact.
But that's not how critics heard it at all, was it?
Not even close. For critics, it wasn't about Netflix or Zipcar. They heard, "You'll own nothing," and immediately thought, loss of private property, a fundamental right, gone.
Replaced by total dependence?
Total dependence on some kind of corporate state entity that controls all the assets, and you just rent access. They saw it as the blueprint for losing autonomy, for potential control.
Wow. So the same 7 words, interpreted as either utopian efficiency and freedom from stuff.
Or dystopian control, the end of basic rights. That communication gap is just massive.
Yeah.
Hashtag the necessity of change. Arguments FOR.
Okay, let's switch gears then and really unpack the arguments for the reset. If you're a proponent, what's the core logic? Why is such a dramatic overhaul seen as absolutely necessary?
Well, the strongest argument, the one that's hardest to dismiss, really rests on the scientific evidence. It's the unsustainability of the status quo.
This isn't just a feeling, it's data-driven.
It's overwhelmingly data-driven. Continuing with business as usual, as they say, leads to measurable, catastrophic outcomes. We're talking accelerating climate change, biodiversity loss on a scale we've never seen.
Ecological collapse, basically.
That's the word used. So for proponents, the Great Reset isn't just some nice idea. They frame it as the only logical path forward if we want long-term survival as a civilization. It's presented almost as a necessity.
Beyond the planet, what about the social fabric?
That's the other huge piece. Inequality. The sources backing the reset often describe extreme inequality as a kind of social cancer.
And the figures are pretty stark, aren't they? Especially post-pandemic.
Staggering. You see stats like, during the pandemic, the world's 10 richest individuals actually doubled their fortunes. Doubled.
While most people.
While the incomes of the bottom 99% of humanity actually fell. That kind of divergence, proponents argue, simply isn't stable. It breeds resentment, instability. It breaks societies.
So stakeholder capitalism, in this view, is the tool to fix that, to rebalance things.
It's presented as the structural mechanism needed to rebalance the scales, yes. To create a society that's more cohesive, more resilient, because it's fairer.
Okay, so unsustainability and inequality, these are massive problems. How do proponents suggest tackling them effectively?
This naturally leads them to the argument for global governance.
Okay. The idea that nations acting alone can't cut it.
Exactly. Think about it. Pandemics don't respect borders. Climate change is a global phenomenon. Multinational corporations shifting profits to avoid taxes, that's a global issue.
So you need global rules.
GR advocates argue forcefully that you need common regulatory frameworks. Otherwise, you get this constant race to the bottom where countries lower environmental standards or cut corporate taxes just to attract investment, ultimately harming everyone.
That makes logical sense, but let's push on that a bit. When you talk about global governance, it sounds like shifting power away from democratically elected national governments.
That's definitely how critics see it.
And towards these international bodies, maybe like the WEF itself, which aren't elected, how do proponents justify potentially bypassing national sovereignty like that?
The justification usually comes down to 2 things. Urgency and scale.
Urgency and scale. Explain that.
They argue that the crises we face, especially climate change, are moving too fast. And national democracies, with all their political debates and election cycles, are often too slow, maybe too paralyzed by local interests, to act decisively on these huge planetary scale problems.
So it's an efficiency argument.
It's framed that way, yes. The idea is that by getting global corporations and key governments aligned through forums like the WEF, you can achieve faster, more coordinated action. You bypass some of the friction of messy national politics to hit those sustainability goals quicker than perhaps democratic consensus might allow. Necessity dictates speed, in their view. Hashtag the shadow of centralization. Arguments against.
Right, but now let's flip the coin and look at the arguments against the Great Reset, because the opposition is just as fierce.
And what's the core fear here?
The core fear is that the reset, far from being a rescue plan, is actually an existential threat. Critics warn it risks just entrenching the very problems it claims to solve, like concentrated financial power and social exclusion problems we've seen worsen since the 80s.
How so? What's the mechanism they point to?
The absolute central critique revolves around excessive centralization.
Power grab, basically.
That's the language used. Critics hammer the point that the WEF is not a democratic body. It's a private club, essentially. A self-selected group of the world's biggest corporations, powerful political figures, billionaires.
Not exactly representing the average person.
Not even close, they argue. So giving this unelected elite the authority to fundamentally redesign global society. Critics call that, quite bluntly, a technocratic coup d'etat, replacing the will of the people with the plans of experts and CEOs.
Strong words.
Very. And this feeds directly into what some call the Trojan horse argument. Meaning that stakeholder capitalism, despite sounding nice, is seen by critics as just a new disguise for the same old corporate power, sometimes called woke capitalism or capitalism with a green facade.
So just PR greenwashing.
Worse than just PR, the argument goes. The deep concern is, why are the very corporations and financial institutions that many blame for causing the climate crisis or the 2008 financial crash, why are they now positioned as the central architects of the solution?
Instead of being held accountable.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The fear is that the reset doesn't really challenge their power. It actually gives them a mandate to restructure the world according to their interests, potentially making inequality even worse, all under the banner of doing good.
Okay, so there's fear of centralized elite control, fear of corporate capture. What else?
Then you get into the really dystopian stuff, the intersection of the reset agenda with that fourth industrial revolution tech we talked about. This is where the fears about surveillance and control become really prominent.
Right, using tech for the common good could have a dark side.
A very dark side, critics warn. The anxiety focuses heavily on things like mandatory digital identity systems,
which are being rolled out in various forms.
Yes. Also, vaccine passports, which we saw debated fiercely during the pandemic, and perhaps the biggest flashpoint, central bank digital currencies, or CBDCs.
Okay, CBDCs. Let's pause there because that triggers a lot of alarm bells for people. Why is a digital currency issued by a central bank feared so much more than, say, just using my current online bank account or PayPal? It's already digital, right?
It's already digital, yes, but the nature of the control is potentially different. The fear isn't about convenience, it's about programmability and centralized oversight.
Programmability, what does that mean?
Critics argue that unlike the money in your commercial bank account, a CBDC issued directly by the central bank could, theoretically, be programmed.
Programmed to do what?
Well, this is where the fears escalate. Could the state program an expiration date on your funds to force spending? Could they restrict what you're allowed to buy, maybe limit your meat consumption for climate targets, or cap your fuel purchases? And the most chilling scenario for critics, could the state use a CBDC to financially deplatform or disconnect citizens, people deemed dissidents, or those who don't comply with certain mandates? Could they just have their ability to transact switched off?
So the very technology pushed as a solution for global problems
could become the ultimate tool for social control and political coercion in the wrong hands. That's the absolute nightmare scenario painted by opponents.
And this connects back to geopolitics, too.
Absolutely. Critics see the GR's push for global governance as inherently favoring the existing dominant powers, the US, the EU, maybe China. They argue it imposes rules and restructures trade in ways that undermine the sovereignty of smaller nations, particularly in the developing world.
So a clash between globalism and nationalism.
Exactly. They frame it as this top-down globalist project running directly counter to the rise of nationalist sentiments around the world. A fundamental civilizational clash, as some put it. Hashtag tag the core paradox, who decides?
Okay, so when you lay it all out, side by side, it's quite a picture, isn't it?
It really is.
On one hand, you have this diagnosis of crisis, ecological, social, that feels undeniably real. The current path seems unsustainable.
Most people would agree on the diagnosis, I think.
But then the proposed solution, this Great Reset, comes with this huge shadow hanging over it, this fundamental lack of democratic legitimacy, this risk of centralized control.
And that gap, that chasm between the promised utopia of a sustainable world and the feared dystopia of technocratic control, it exists partly because the WEF's own rhetoric is often quite vague, isn't it?
Grand visions, but light on specifics sometimes.
Exactly. It's this big abstract concept which allows everyone to project their greatest hopes onto it, or their deepest fears.
So the core tension isn't really about whether we need change. Most agree we do.
No, the real fight, the crux of it, boils down to how that change happens, and crucially, by whom it gets directed. Who gets to sit at the table and make these fundamental decisions about humanity's future?
And our sources really seem to crystallize this into two competing paths, don't they?
They do. Path 1. Change driven from the top down. Global forums like the WEF, big multinational corporations, powerful governments making deals.
The Davos model, essentially.
You could call it that. Path 2. Change driven from the bottom up, rooted in things like deliberative democracy, local community control, popular sovereignty, maybe a wider range of decentralized economic approaches.
So elite direction versus democratic participation.
That's the fundamental conflict.
Yep.
And the analysis tends to conclude that the kind of transformations needed tackling climate, tackling inequality, they require more than just backroom deals between CEOs and presidents.
What more do they require?
To do it justly and without sacrificing freedom, the argument goes, you need to fundamentally transform the logic of economic accumulation itself, you need fair global taxation systems, and you absolutely need robust, genuine democratic participation and accountability at every single level.
But that democratic piece feels like the part that's potentially being sidelined in the reset narrative.
That's certainly the core criticism, yes. The diagnosis is clear, the proposed solutions are radical, but the process feels lacking in democratic input.
It really feels like a defining moment, maybe the defining moment for the 21st century. The Great Reset, whether you love it or hate it, has definitely put the big questions on the table. We have to confront these global challenges.
We do. They can't be ignored. So here's the final thought, the thing to really mull over. If the current business-as-usual system is, as many argue, ecologically suicidal,
which the science seems to back up,
and if the proposed alternative, this corporate-led global reset, carries genuine risks of authoritarian control through centralization and technology.
which the critics convincingly highlight.
Then what's the third way? What intermediate path exists? Is there a decentralized economic model, or maybe multiple models, rooted firmly in democratic accountability, respecting individual liberty and national sovereignty, that humanity could invent or scale up?
How do we escape this really difficult binary choice?
Exactly. How do we navigate between ecological disaster and potential technocratic tyranny? That's the urgent question the Great Reset forces upon all of us. Something for you to think about.
Indeed. The future isn't predetermined. It's being shaped right now by how we respond to these tensions, this clash between the need for change and the defense of freedom. We really encourage you to explore the sources further, dig deeper, and figure out where you stand and how you want to engage with this unfolding future. Thanks for diving in with us today.